Hello everyone, welcome to the After 2 webinar series. Tonight we are talking all things interactive writing. Hopefully you have had the opportunity to visit Fuse and download the supporting resources pack and also join the Padlet, but I'll talk to you about that in a second. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we all come to this session and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am coming to you from Wurundjeri land and I would like to pay my respects to those people. My name is Narissa Leung. If we haven't met before, if this is your first session, welcome. So my history is I'm an education consultant here in Victoria. I am a former primary school principal and this year, lucky enough to be a Book Week judge, I was judging the Eve Pownell, the Information Book Category Award. What an absolutely fascinating experience that was. So actually, and a lot of people don't realize this, the judging for next year's books has already started. So my job actually started last year, I think back in April. I started to, well, technically I was supposed to get one package of books a month and then read all of those books and then say whether I thought yes, no, or maybe that they should go through. And then we made our decision, I think way back in January, and I've had to sit on that information ever since then. So so it feels good to be able to, this week actually talk to people about the winners. So hopefully you are all celebrating Book Week with your students in some way, shape or form. Obviously in Victoria, we're all online at the moment. So we have to be very creative about how we do that. Today, I celebrated with my nieces and nephews. We all got dressed up, as you do, for Book Week, and we shared some of the books and had a good chat about them. So hopefully you can still share that joy of Book Week with your students. It doesn't always have to be a dress up, of course, but I think that's one of the special things. Now, just while I have your attention, the winning book for early childhood was called No Never, and I do recommend it. It's a fantastic read. This is one I read to my nephews and nieces today. Very, very clever book. All of the ones for early childhood would be appropriate for the F2 classroom. The winner of the Picture Storybook of the Year was Meg McKinley's How to Make a Bird. It's not one that I would recommend for an F2 classroom. So not saying that's a bad book. I'm just saying that it is definitely more for the senior school. So I would recommend leaving that one for the senior school. In the honor books for the Picture Storybooks, it is Your Birthday Was the Best. I would recommend this for an F2 classroom. This is a hilarious story about a cockroach going to a birthday party, and the text and the images don't tell the same story, and it's a really funny book. So definitely for F2 audience. So there's a couple that you can share with your students. But I would leave How to Make a Bird for the older classes. Now, in terms of me, all of my contact details are on the screen there. I am at Auslit Teacher on most of the social channels, and there I share picture storybooks, mainly Australian, to be used as mentor texts in teaching reading and writing. On the right-hand side, I always like to introduce myself by way of what I'm currently reading. I am reading Metalfish Falling Snow, which is an honour book for the YA, the Young Adult Fiction category of the Book Week Awards. This is a terrific read. I really like this, and I definitely think it was much better than the winner. I can say that. I wasn't judging the YA, but I totally didn't agree with their decision. And the other book that I'm reading at the moment, obviously there's a lot going on in Afghanistan at the moment, and my way of dealing with traumatic events or big world events like this is to read and educate myself on the way of the world. So fortunately, I had this one on my bookshelf, The Underground Girls of Kabul. It is a fascinating read, and I strongly recommend it for everyone. It's about the hidden lives of Afghan girls disguised as boys. It's such an interesting read. So I put it on there because I highly recommend it. So if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know what you're reading, that would be great. Okay, so in this webinar series, we have had a few sessions already, and I was just reflecting on this the other day. Originally, back in the day, all of these were going to be live sessions in at Basto. I think we ended up having one of them in at Basto. The first one, assessment, I pre-recorded that. All of the recordings for these are currently available on the Basto's YouTube channel. And there are some great PD sessions on there. So if you found yourself having a bit of time where you can, and you're wanting to do some professional learning, do go and check out Basto's YouTube channel because there's some great learning to be had on there. Tonight we're talking about interactive writing. This follows on in our series. So far I've spoken about phonological awareness, speaking and listening, the workshop model as well. And our final session is going to be in October. We're going to talk more about writing. Now, the format for the session is that, yes, it is a lecture style. Unfortunately, I would love to be have some other option, but in the online world, this is what we are. This is how we've found ourselves, so that's okay. We try and have a lot of conversation through our Padlet link. So you can see the link on the screen there up the top. If you put that in, that means that you can share in the conversation. This is a great place to share resources. It's a great place to share links, to share experiences. So anything that we're talking about tonight, if you have resources that can help other teachers, great, share them on that page. It's also a space to add questions or to just generally share your thinking about what we're talking about. One of the benefits of contributing to the Padlet is that this is available after the session. So if someone shares a fantastic link, and in the last session there were some really good resources shared, then you can access those resources after this session finishes. So definitely jump on there and contribute to the conversation. And we'll have the team from DED in there as well, and they'll answer some of your questions as well. So they've probably put a question in there asking you to introduce yourselves, so that's where you can start. Okay, so tonight we're going to start off by talking about what is interactive writing. Then I want to put it into the bigger context. I want to go big first, funnel it down to say where does it fit into the whole context of teaching writing, and then go into the nitty-gritty to say, well, these are some of the lesson elements that are present in effective use of interactive writing. And we're going to finish off with the research. I usually start with the research. I'm going to finish with it today just for something different. So the understanding goals for this session. You will build your understanding of the interactive writing process, deepen your understanding of the elements of effective interactive writing, particularly when I'm talking about, the lesson elements, and understand the place of this in the broader context of writing instruction. And of course, I'm always asking you to reflect on your own practice. So the success criteria, I can outline the differences between various teaching practices associated with teaching writing. I think this is important. I'm going to talk to you a bit more about this. Identify elements of effective interactive writing sessions, and reflect on the teaching practices in your own school or your own classroom. All right, there's some pretty big goals there. Let's see how we go. All right, so we're going to start off by talking about what is interactive writing. And I find this interesting because as the more people that I've spoken to, and even when I was asking for examples from teachers for this, I had to do a bit of clarifying around what actually do we mean by interactive writing. One of the things that I found fascinating is that there is not a clear definition in any of the literature that says this one sentence, this is what interactive writing is, even on our toolkit, unfortunately. So I've tried to find the ones I think are most applicable and help you to understand what it is. This one, interactive writing is a teaching strategy supported by both social constructivist theory, remember Vygotsky from university, dust that part of the brain off, and the emergent literacy approach from Clay that allows children and teachers to share the pen during writing lessons to create group texts. One of the reasons that I think that this is probably one of the better definitions of interactive writing is because firstly, it is introduced as a teaching strategy, and that is exactly what it is. It's one of the strategies that we have available to us on our tool belt. The other thing that I like about this is that it gets to the point. Interactive writing is about sharing the pen. That's the thing that makes it different to the other teaching practices that we have available to us as teachers of writing. And also that we're creating group texts. So during interactive writing, the teacher offers varying levels of support. That's key. And children are invited to take an active role in the writing process. So Interactive writing for me is so powerful because this is where we can really differentiate our teaching to the needs of the students that we're working with. And that's where that varying levels of support comes in. The teacher makes decisions about appropriate guidance based on each child's current level of engagement with the text. So all of the way back in the very first webinar that I ran, and I talked about that idea of the teaching and learning cycle, which previously probably, or many people have probably considered it as being plan, teach, assess, plan, teach, assess. And I said we need to pull that assess to the start of the cycle. Assess, plan, teach. Know your kids first, get to know their strengths, get to know what supports they need, then work out your planning and your teaching from that. And that's where interactive writing really, if you know your students and you know their strengths, this is where you can really cater for those. So the other thing about interactive writing is that it pulls all three modes of literacy together. So we're talking about reading, a lot of rereading. We're talking about writing, of course, but we're also talking about speaking and listening. And we'll discuss that more as we talk about the elements. The other thing is that it can be used as a whole class practice, particularly down, and it happens more so down in the F year, in the foundation year, and also a small group. Now, small group naturally is going to be where you can better target the needs of your students, but it absolutely can be used as a whole class practice, especially when you're introducing students to things like concepts of print and just writing in general. So tonight, I want to really hone in on it as a small group instructional practice, but everything that we talk about can absolutely be applied to the whole group practice as well. Okay, so that was a very quick definition of interactive writing, but what I want to do is to put it in the big picture of writing instruction in general, because as teachers, we have different tools available to us to help our students learn how to write. And I always say that teachers need 3 chunks of knowledge, and there's probably a way more professional way of saying that, but 3 chunks of knowledge is they need to know their students inside out. Who are they as humans first, and who are they as writers? What are their strengths as writers? Where are they at? They need to know the content. So what does it say in the Victorian Curriculum about what students need to be able to do by the end of F1 and 2? And then the third chunk is that they need to know the teaching practices. So what are some of the strategies? What are some of the pedagogies that I can use, that I can pull out to help my students get closer to that content? And that's where teaching practices, the knowledge of different teaching practices, and I would say knowing the full strength version of these teaching practices is really important. Okay, so if you've ever come to a session that I've spoken at, you'll know I always talk about gradual release of responsibility. So here it is. I'm not going to go into depth in talking about this tonight. I just want to align the teaching practices to it. But essentially thinking that in all good teaching, and in all teaching anyone anything really, although the gradual release was originally designed for teaching reading, but it's extended beyond that now. We need to think about how much support we're giving our students, and how much support our students need from us. And so when I'm thinking about teaching practices, well, the teaching practices that we have available to us, well, they sit in different places on this gradual release of responsibility. The gradual release of responsibility is a model that requires you to know your kids and know what their strengths are, and also to know, when do I need to start pulling back? When do I need to start giving less support or less scaffolding and start handing over more of the learning to my students? And it's not a linear model. So it's not just, I'll model it, we'll do it together, you'll do it with your mates, and then you're doing it by yourself. That's not how it was designed. Unfortunately, that's sometimes how it's used in schools. This is something that I use to constantly reflect on my own teaching, to say, oh, yeah, they're not getting that. Okay, so let me think about gradual release. Okay, I've probably spent too much time, down the bottom. I need to pull myself back up to the top again. So you can slide yourself up and down this depending on the needs of your students. So Firstly, modeled writing. Well, by the very name modeled, this is the I do it section. So we're going to put that up the top. So this is the highest level of teacher support and the lowest level of student responsibility. When I am modeling writing, that is when I'm demonstrating doing the writing myself. And this usually is accompanied by a think aloud. Not usually, I should say. This should be in its full strength implementation of this be accompanied by a think aloud. And a think aloud is when I am doing the writing, I am verbalizing the thoughts that are coming into my head as a writer. I'm thinking, should I start this with a capital? With this letter? Yeah, I think I would because it's the name of a person. Yes, I'll put that there. So it's doing that thinking aloud to let the writers in your class see a proficient writer in action. Because if you think about it, how often do they get to see and hear what's going on in the mind of a proficient writer? Probably never. So modeled writing is that opportunity for the students to sit back and go, oh, okay, so that's what a proficient writer looks like. Now I know what I'm aiming for. All right, I'll talk a little bit more about modeled writing in a second. Shared writing. Now, shared writing is probably the one that gets confused with interactive writing the most. Often when people say, interactive writing or shared writing, they'll use the terms interchangeably. They are different practices. And I think it's important to know what is the difference so that you know which practice to pull out at what time, okay? So shared writing is I still hold the pen. As the teacher, I'm holding the pen. So in modeled writing, I'm holding the pen, and in shared writing, I'm holding the pen. In interactive writing, go back to our definition, we're sharing the pen. And that's the big difference between shared and interactive. Who is holding the pen? Then we're looking at guided writing, and it's not necessarily as lockstep linear as this, but guided writing is we're handing over even more responsibility to the students. And then we're looking at independent writing. And what I want you to think about this is don't think that you have to do all of these things in line, but just be aware of where they sit in that gradual release of responsibility. So we can go from modeled writing into independent, but we need to know that there are some teaching practices in between. If our students aren't being successful when they're going down to independent writing, that we can pull ourselves back up to some of those teaching practices that are in between, okay? Now, let me talk to you about the differences in each of these things. So I've created this table. I hope this makes it easier to understand and to cement it in your minds. Modeled writing. This is at the top of the gradual release of responsibility. Who comes up with the idea for writing? You do. The teacher does, okay? Who does the actual handwriting or the actual scribing? You do. And is the text shared or individual? It's an individual text. The difference in the next one, shared writing, who comes up with the idea for writing? You both do. This is when you start saying, has anyone got any ideas for, what else we can include in this narrative? Or let's say I've started writing about book week celebrations, timely topic. And I've started the writing to say that one of my favorite things about book week is dressing up. Has anyone got any ideas for what other things I could add to this? That's when we can start crowdsourcing. I call it crowdsourcing ideas from our students. Now, in classrooms, what I see too often is that we start out thinking, okay, that's it. I'm going to model for my students. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to demonstrate for them what writing looks like, what a writer thinks as they're writing, what writing looks like as it's going down. And we too quickly slip into shared, okay? So we're standing up at the board and we're thinking, all right, so, let me think. What could I write about? I'm going to write about the book week and I want to talk about everyone's costumes. Yeah, so I'm going to say, I really liked all the different costumes. Who else has an idea? And all of a sudden, we've just slipped straight out of modeled into shared. Now, that's okay as long as there is a time that your students get to see absolute clear modeling. And what I mean by that is that when you're modeling, You are the expert writer in the classroom. That is their one opportunity to see the expert in action. And probably one of the ways that I explain this, I love Anna Walker's illustrations. She illustrates all of Jane Godwin's books. You might be familiar with some of her books. And I think of this, if, say, for example, Anna Walker said, I'm going to run a class to teach you how to illustrate. I would be first in, I'll be in that class, I'll be in the front row of that class, even though I have no illustration skills whatsoever. I can't wait to learn from Anna Walker. I want to know how she does it. How does she, do the magic on those pages? I want to hear everything about it. And if she accidentally slips into share, this is what it looks like. She says, okay, I'm Anna Walker. I've, illustrated these beautiful books. And okay, well, how about you all share the way that you illustrate? I'll be sitting in that front row thinking, no, I want to hear from Anna. I want to hear how you do it. So that's what our kids are thinking. We need to make sure that we're not slipping into shared too quickly. We have to give our students the opportunity to see a proficient writer in action. The other thing about, oh my goodness, I'm on my high horse. I'm on the soapbox about shared writing. The other thing about modeled and shared writing is when you are modeling writing, you are modeling this is particularly relevant when we're getting up into year 1 and year 2, you're modeling some of the challenges that you come across as a writer, because let's be honest, writing is problem solving. There are so many problems to solve in writing, from idea problems to main problem and solution. What am I going to do with that? How much information will I put in here? Right down to how do I spell this word? If we go, when we're stuck on an idea, when we're writing that book week and we're stuck for an idea and we crowdsource our answer from the group, it's the students sitting in front of us, we're not modeling, we're not teaching them how to overcome that same problem in their writing. So when they go down to sit at their tables and they're thinking, oh, I've run out of ideas here. What could I do? We haven't shown them a strategy other than ask everyone else sitting on your table. So just be conscious. Modeled writing, our kids need to experience, they need to see you demonstrating and thinking aloud. Shared writing is when we can start to join ideas and we can collaboratively come up with the idea that we're going to be writing about. However, I, as the teacher, am still holding the pen, okay? The text is a shared text. We're creating this collaboratively. Interactive writing, again, we collaboratively come up with the idea for the writing, and this is the difference, we're both responsible for actually scribing the idea. So I'll scribe some parts, and the students will scribe some parts. The text itself is a shared text. It's a text that we're all going to use the same text because we're creating the ideas together and we're scribing it together. Guided writing. In guided writing, we're just handing over the reins just a little bit more. Who's responsible for coming up with the idea for writing is the student, obviously with some guidance for us. We're not going to just, push them off the cliff here and say good luck. The students do the actual writing themselves, and it's an individual text, obviously with our close support for all of these elements in guided writing. So you can see the differences each time. And finally, we'll go down to independent writing. The students come up with the idea, the students do the actual writing, and it's an individual text as well. The difference with guided writing is that close teacher support when we're helping them. And usually guided writing is done in a small group, whereas independent writing can be done as a whole class. So hopefully that has helped to clarify the teaching practices. One that I just want to highlight, because this one does come up a bit when we're talking about interactive writing, is this idea of language experience approach writing, because there's a language experience approach reading as well. The difference in language experience approach writing, who comes up with the idea in that is the students, whereas in interactive writing, it's the teachers and the students together. In language experience approach, the students have much more responsibility for coming up with whatever it is that they're writing. And the other difference is that it's usually in their syntax, in their language. So in interactive writing, the text that we write needs to be syntactically correct and grammatically correct and spelt correctly as well. in language experience, the focus isn't so heavily placed on, ensuring that the syntax is conventional. It's the language, the oral language that the students bring to the text is used so that it's familiar to them. So that's one of the differences. Another difference is that the text that you create in language experience can be a shared text. So if you're creating it as a small group, or it can be an individual text as well. So I just wanted to point that one out because they can be confused quite easily. Okay, that was a lot of information. So I have, well, I'll let you in on a secret here. I've employed my nephew, who's in year 9, to type up this table for me. So I'm hoping that he hasn't got any errors in there. This is from Fonis and Pinnell's book on interactive writing, and it just gives you more of an insight into the different teaching practices and the differences between those teaching practices. So I'm going to provide you with 3 minutes to go through and to really solidify in your mind what are the differences between each of these teaching practices. And I want you to think about when might you use each of these practices, because I talk about these teaching practices are being on your tool belt. You can pull these out at any time, depending on the needs of your students. It's all about knowing your students, knowing the content, and moving those two things closer together. And pull out different teaching practices to help move those two things together. So think about when might you want to pull out modeled writing, when might you want to pull out teaching, so interactive writing. This is in the resource pack. The resource pack was on the Fuse link, and I think the DET team will also post a link to it in the Padlet as well. So I'll give you 3 minutes. Think about what's new for you, what's confirmed, and what questions do you have about these teaching practices. And I'll share your thinking in the Padlet. I'll see you in 3 minutes. Okay, everyone, try and use a quiet voice so you're not scared. Hopefully that was enough time to have a look through the table and start to solidify in your mind the differences between those teaching practices and to think about when you might use each of those teaching practices with your students. There's no, I guess my caution around teaching practices is that and I see it in schools a lot where it'll say on the timetable that, or in the school's instructional model, it'll say that this is when model writing happens, this is when this happens. These practices need to be used based on the needs of the students. So different practices are more useful at different times. And I think the more you understand around each of these teaching practices, the better you'll be able to use them and know when they're going to achieve the results that you want them to achieve. The next question that we often have around this teaching practice, so let's talk about interactive writing, is when in the writing workshop model would I use these practices? Now, firstly, I just want to say I did a whole webinar on the reading workshop model. It was one of the earlier webinars in this series. And I said then, spoiler alert, the writing workshop model is exactly the same. Okay, so we've got the lesson opening where we talk about the learning intentions for the writing session. The mini lesson is one of the places that we might employ the teaching practice of interactive writing. Okay, so you might be doing this here rather than doing a modeled writing session. This is one of the places. The mini lesson, as with reading workshop model, needs to be short and sharp and focused. So whatever we've spoken to the students about as our learning intention in the opening, that's what we're really going to be zeroing in on in the mini lesson. Another option for using using interactive writing is to do that in the student work time part of the workshop model. So this is where we can pull a small group of students with similar needs together to use one of the teaching practices with them, in this case, interactive writing. The final part of the lesson, or the final part of the workshop model for writing, is the debrief. And I spoke in the reading workshop model webinar about this idea that I prefer to call this a debrief, not a share, particularly when we're talking about writing. If we refer to this as a share in writing, this can lose its strength, the debrief part. We can start to think that it's just a time for everyone to share their writing at the end of the session. We want to be much more nuanced. And remember, way back in the early webinars, I talked about that idea that we're aiming for precision from Mary Jean Gallagher, not prescription. Precision in the writing workshop comes when we are super, absolutely clear on what it is we want our students to know or understand about writing by the end of the lesson. So we're going to talk to them about that in the opening. We're going to model it or use interactive writing, what a teaching practice in the mini lesson. We might look at mentor texts. Our students are going to have a go at implementing it. But that debrief, that's where we cycle back to the start and we say, this was the whole point of this lesson. We were going to learn about X. How did you go with that? In this debrief, this is where we build student agency. And by student agency, I mean the ability for the students to reflect on themselves as learners and to say, yeah, I am actually improving in my writing. This is what I learned today. I used to think this. Now I think this. I can see that I'm making forward progress as a writer. The debrief, that's where that happens. And we need to teach our students how to reflect, to say, you know, in today's lesson, we're really focusing on how we were using, I don't know, I'll pull something off the top of my head, using the spelling. We're going to use a strategy of using a have a go chart or something, you know, we're going to use a strategy of this. How did you go with that in your writing today? Have a look at your writing, turn and talk to the person next to you, tell them where you practice that strategy. That's what we're talking about in the debrief. It's not so much everyone read out your sentence or your story that you wrote, because that's can be a bit airy-fairy and a bit off, you know, it takes us away from what I wanted you to learn in this lesson and how did you learn it? Were you successful? So they're the two places. We could use it in the mini lesson as a whole class, or we could use it in the student work time as a small group instructional practice. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to reflect on all of that, the definition of interactive writing, where it fits into the greater context of teaching practices for writing, and also where it fits in the workshop model for writing as well. 2 minutes. I would like to see your thoughts in the Padlet, and then we're coming back to look at the lesson structure for that. See you in 2. Okay, I know 2 minutes is so quick, isn't it? Now, thank you so much to those people contributing to the Padlet. Just a couple of things that I've noticed in there. Someone was asking about the time fractions on the slide that I presented previously. They are not mandated times by any stretch of the imagination. Time obviously is a prisoner in, or actually, I read recently that writing is a prisoner to time in most classrooms, which I would absolutely agree with. I am not, when we're talking about time, I think use the time that you have and absolutely maximize and strengthen the teaching practice that you do in that time. It's not a matter so much of the more time I attribute to something, the better the teaching will be. It's, you know, if you teach writing for 3 hours versus a classroom teacher that's doing it for 1 hour, if they're doing 1 hour of highly effective practice, it is better than 3 hours of not so effective practice. So don't get too caught up on the times. It is about strengthening what you're doing in the time that you have. And that's where I'm trying to go with this interactive writing, you know, talking about teaching practices tonight. So that's probably one thing that I would have to say. The other thing, I notice a lot of people have mentioned, oh, have you realized, Riss, we're in remote learning at the moment. How are we going to do this online? Well, good question. It just so happens, and I move to the next slide for this, what does interactive writing look like? I love to see Australian examples of things. Well, it just so happens that we're all in remote learning at the moment, and as am I, makes it incredibly difficult to source videos and examples from Australian classrooms. So the example that I've got for you tonight, because I did have some regional people, they were going to film themselves and give it to me this week. And of course, you've now joined the Metro crew in lockdown. So the example that I've got tonight is actually of an interactive writing session in a remote teaching environment. And I have selected that because the practitioner doing the lesson is one that I highly regard. And I thought, well, you know, we're all in the situation that we're in, so we may as well watch a remote learning version of it anyway. So we'll get to that in a second. Okay. I want to take you through the key elements of an interactive writing session now. This is not a prescription. This is not saying you must do this, then do this, then do this. This is, I want you to know what the different elements are so you can work out the, how much of each element is going to suit the students that you've got sitting in front of you right now, or, when you're teaching them. A few key messages that I want you to take away from this. The whole purpose of interactive writing is to support your students towards independence. So everything that you do in interactive writing is because when they go back to sit at their table, you want them to be able to do that independently and successfully. So keep that in mind. Interactive writing is a process. It is not a lockstep program that is going to automatically make all of your students better writers. It is a process, and there's no perfect amount of each of these key elements that I'm going to talk to you about. It is, you have to take into consideration the human being sitting in front of you. The process is more important than the product, than what you create at the end of the interactive writing session. I'll talk more to you about that. And the focus of the lesson, it should absolutely always be responsive to the needs of your students. The reason that you're getting this group of kids together to run an interactive writing session is because you've identified this need in their writing, and you're going to highlight that through using interactive writing. Now, as I said, I have a video for you. I absolutely front up apologize. This isn't an Australian video, but you can appreciate it's a bit tricky to, get into classrooms at the minute. And I have selected this video from the Institute of Educational Sciences because it's an example from my favorite researcher, Nell Duke. Everyone knows I have a girl crush on Nell Duke. Nell Duke is a researcher. She's also has a teaching background, and she has her fingers firmly in the classroom as well as in the research field of education. And in this example, she, a couple of things. One is that she hasn't met these students before. So obviously that's not ideal. So you'll see the implications for that in the video. Secondly is that she's in a remote teaching environment where she hasn't taught them before. So she hasn't been able to explicitly teach them all of the technology that she wants them to use. So they are using Jamboard as their method of actually sharing the pen. And I don't know that it's super effective. I think they should have used the text tool instead, but she does say, cut her some slack. She's just trying to model what an interactive writing lesson could look like, and things would be different if she had an established relationship with the students as well. So one thing that I want to do with this, we're going to watch the video from start to finish. It takes about 7 minutes, and then I'm going to pull apart each of the lesson sections for you. I'm going to talk to you about the key element, and then we're going to re-watch just that part of her video to say this is what it looked like here, okay? So let's have a look. I will mute myself first, and then we'll watch this video of Nell Duke.
So I have an idea about something that we could write, and it's a little bit of a sad story. So I'm going to tell you the sad story first, okay? The sad story is that my partner, Dave, I'm married to him, Dave cut his finger, his pinky finger. Can you show me your pinky finger? You have pinky fingers too, right? He cut his pinky finger really badly, and it hurts. And he wants it to get better because he's getting kind of tired of always having a bandage on it. I'm going to show you what his finger looks like right now. You see that there? See that giant bandage on his pinky finger? And it hurts? Yeah. It's kind of sad, isn't it? And so I thought it would be nice if we could just write him a little note to try to make him feel better about his pinky. What do you think about that idea? And then I'll give him the note. Does that sound okay? Okay, so AJ, can you tell me, do you have any ideas about what we could say to try to make Dave feel better about his cut pinky finger? What do you think we could say to make him feel better?
We hope you feel better. It's okay.
It's okay. It's going to be okay. And we hope you feel better. Those are good ideas. Brianna, do you have some ideas about what we could say to make Dave feel better?
Yes.
What do you think you might say?
You might say, what?
Well, AJ had a couple different ideas. Let me share a couple of his ideas and see what you think might work well. He said maybe we could say we hope you feel better, or maybe we could say it's going to be okay. What do you think?
It might be okay.
That might be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think, Leah? What would you like to say to Dave about his hurt finger?
It's probably gonna get better. I read everyone writing this note has had cuts, and it hurts a lot.
Okay, it's probably going to get better. So that, and everybody, all of you have had cuts on your pinky fingers before, haven't you? All right. Yes,
One time I smashed my finger. My sister smashed my finger.
Oh, ouch.
It's a big rock.
That sounds like it would really hurt. Did it get better?
It was on my pinky finger.
It was your pinky finger, the same as Dave. Brianna, have you ever had a cut or ever hurt yourself?
Lots of blood.
Oh, lots of blood. Yikes. Let's hear it, Brianna.
Well, I was sliding a piece of paper on my pinky finger, but I accidentally got a cut.
And did it get better?
Yep.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, you've all had cuts or owies on your fingers that have gotten better. And so I think that it's a great idea for us to tell Dave that. So let's all go into our Jamboard now. Can you all go into Jamboard, our Jamboard? And if we're writing a note or a letter to somebody, sometimes we start a certain way. We sometimes start saying, Dear Dave, we would say. Okay, so we'll start with the word dear. Should I start writing, let's see, do you think I should start writing down here? Would down here be a good place for me to start writing Dear Dave? So let's start by figuring out what letter we're going to write first. So the word is dear. Can you all say dear?
Dear.
Can you say dear? Yeah. And how about you, Brianna? Can you say dear?
Dear.
Dear. And what sound, can you make the sound you hear at the beginning of dear? Dear.
D.
I heard somebody say D. We hear the D sound and we use the letter D for that sound. That's right. So AJ, I'm going to ask you to be the first writer. Can you please make a letter D at the top of the paper? Can you write a D? Oh, I see the line straight down. That's the beginning of the D. There you go. D. All right. And then I'm going to write the next couple of letters in the word. The next couple of letters. Whoops, I've got the wrong. And now let's listen for the last sound we hear in the word dear. 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 Can you make the sound you're hearing? Dear. Everybody say the drr. Yeah, that's right. It's the r sound, and we use the letter R for that sound. Leah, could you put an R where it goes up there on the paper? There you go. That's right. So you put the letter R. All right. So now we have to leave a space right here. We're going to leave a space right here. And then we're going to write the first letter of Dave's name because we're writing Dear Dave. So that's going to be Brianna's turn. Brianna, can you make a D somewhere after this red mark? Because I'm putting a space here between the words. Yep. That's Brianna. Very nice, Brianna. That's the first letter in Dave's name, Dear Dave. And I'll write the rest. Dear Dave. So now we've written Dear Dave, and you said you were going to say, it will be okay. That was something that each of you said something about his finger will be okay, right? So
I said that.
you said that. You sure did, Brianna. You said it would be okay, just like your cut was okay. And Leah thought that it would probably be okay or might be okay. And AJ thought it might, just like his finger was okay. So we're going to say the sentence, it will be okay. Can you all say that with me? Ready? It will be okay. Let's say it again. It will be okay. All right, now we're going to count how many words are in that sentence. Are you ready? Ready? It will be okay. Now, okay is just one word. So let's do it again. Ready? It will be okay. So how many words did you count there? Can you hold up your fingers for how many words you think you have? Brianna's holding up 4 fingers. That's what I think too. And AJ's holding up 4 fingers. And Leah is. We're all in agreement that it's 4 words that we're going to write. Okay, so I'm going to go back over to our Jamboard. And we're going to do it will be okay.
You can see why they say never to work with children or animals in the media industry. So cute. But that's what I love about Nell Duke, is she's very real. Those kids are very real, and it's it's all warts and all. So hopefully you can see what we're going to do now is talk about the different lesson elements and pull apart what happened in that lesson, because even though it's a remote lesson, I still think that we can take that learning into the, when we go back to face-to-face, which hopefully is soon, then we can use these elements. So the elements are shared experience, compose and rehearse the message, share the pen, reread the message, review the learning, and share with the audience. And of course, we're going to use these backwards and forwards depending on the needs of the students in front of us. So let's look at the first one, shared experience. Now, this was very, very difficult for Nell Duke because she didn't know the students. So they didn't have the luxury of going off on an excursion or reading a text together. And that's why she had to pull up the shared experience by, giving a very brief story about her husband Dave's pinky finger. The idea of the shared experience is that it provides the fodder for writing. It gives you the why for giving, and it's providing an authentic reason to actually write in the first place. It needs to hold relevance for the students. It needs to mean something for them, and that was what was challenging for Nell Duke in that online environment. Not because it was online, but because she didn't have the background, relationships with the students. Has to lead to an authentic purpose and audience for writing. And one of the reasons for this is because we're setting, the whole purpose of interactive writing is that we're setting students up to be successful, independent writers. And actually, our long-term goal is to create lifelong writers. And if we want our students to be lifelong writers, they need to know that people write for real audiences and real purposes outside of the captivity of school. So let's start that way back down in our interactive writing lessons. It teaches students that writers get ideas from what they know and what they experience. And most stories, most anything is written because an author has had an experience and thought, oh, yeah, actually that's similar. I'm going to turn that into a piece of writing, whether it's a narrative or anything else. So we're teaching students right from down in foundation where writers get their ideas. And it's one of the main places is from things that have happened to them, experiences that they've had, things that have gone on in their own lives. And shared experience is especially helpful for EAL learners because we now have an experience that all of us can talk about, and that we know that all of the students in our group have had that same experience, so they know what it is that we're talking about. They probably have the vocabulary to go alongside that. It needs to be an experience worth writing about, which I think Nell Duke just teed on the edge of that. Doesn't mean that you need to go off and plan some extravagant excursion. It just means that you need to be conscious of what is it that we're writing about and why are we writing about it. So where can you get ideas for shared experiences? And I saw someone, I can't remember which school, in the chat said that they've just been writing about Book Week. Some of this shared experiences, it could come if you've read a text together, which, hello, Book Week, perfect opportunity. We've read a book. Maybe we've read a few books. Maybe we've read all of Aaron Blaby's books, and now we're going to write a little summary about what his books are like or what they're mostly about. Curriculum content, this is where interactive writing can actually stretch across the curriculum areas. We can start to write about things in our science classrooms or our maths classrooms or, other content areas. Of course, incursions or excursions would be great for interactive writing. Any class events that you've had, be they online or offline, class celebrations, or even classroom routines. So I'm going to show you just in detail the first 4 of those so you can get some ideas about what it could look like. If you've had a read aloud, so let's say, we've read No Never as a class. We've been reading that for Book Week. We've read it a few times. We could use this as an opportunity to do a retell of the story using interactive writing. Maybe we're going to do a book review to suggest it to other people. We could compare books in an author study. So this is written by Libby Haythorne. She's written some other books. We could see if there are any commonalities in her books and do a bit of writing about that. Maybe we could write a classroom display of her books. Innovation on a text. So, we've looked at her book and it's given us an idea for something that we could write about in a similar way. Maybe we can write a letter to the author or the illustrator to let them know what we thought. And most authors that I speak to say they love getting letters from students and they try and respond to them. So over on the right, thank you so much to Caitlin Whiteman from Donburn Primary School for supplying this. They had been, have a look at the text. At the top of the beanstalk, we found a flying car castle. We found a castle and a flying car. And it looks to be a bit of an innovation on a text. You can see here that the pen has been shared. You can see where Caitlin's done the handwriting and where the students have taken control of the pen as well. So this is an example of an authentic reason to write after they've joined in a shared experience, which was a read aloud text. And I must say 4 points to Caitlin for her illustration there, because I think that's well above my skills. Another example for a shared experience, curriculum content. So you could use interactive writing to explain a maths concept as a small group. You could use it to do a summary of a maths task that you've done, a list of questions about a science topic, a description of a science experiment. And this is an example over here on the right-hand side. Symmetry is when we cut something down the middle and both sides are the same. So you can see we're using a teaching practice for writing, but we're applying it in a different content area. And I think the opportunities for that are endless. And that is a real reason to write. We can put that up on the wall and remind ourselves what symmetry is. Incursion and excursion. So you could write letters to the parents to let them know that the incursion or excursion is coming up. You could do a retell of the trip, a thank you letter, an information piece, a how-to piece. And I haven't got a picture of this because I was waiting for an example this week, but I was reflecting last year, one of the schools I work with, they took their whole foundation class down to the supermarket and did some writing after that. But I was thinking now, wow, wouldn't that be complex? Everyone would have to sign in with the QR code on the way in. It'd just be too much. Another example of a shared experience, class event. You could write an information piece about the event to tell other people from other classes what you did, procedural texts about the event, a retell of the event, a set of instructions. The example on the right-hand side, this comes from Macaria, Fontes and Pinnell's book called Interactive Writing. This classroom, they read a story about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and then the teacher said, oh, let's make some. Well, if I'm going to make some, I need a shopping list. And so obviously there's an authentic reason to write out a shopping list. And so the teacher used interactive writing with the students to construct this shopping list. And they then, the teacher went off and purchased the items, brought them back, and then they read through the list to tick off to make sure the teacher had all of the items. The next step in this was that they actually made the sandwiches. And, you know, I say 90% of teaching in the junior years is acting, or in any year really. So the teacher from the next classroom came in and said, oh, wow, could you make some instructions so my class can, you know, make the same sandwiches? So there's your authentic purpose for writing. So the next lot of interactive writing, they were doing this as a whole class, was about constructing the how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I think opportunity there you can see that authentic link and worthy reason for writing. All right, let's just quickly reflect on what the shared experience looked like in that Nell Duke lesson.
So I have an idea about something that we could write, and it's a little bit of a sad story. So I'm going to tell you the sad story first, okay? The sad story is that my partner, Dave, I'm married to him, Dave cut his finger, his pinky finger. Can you show me your pinky finger? You have pinky fingers too, right? He cut his pinky finger really badly, and it hurts. And he wants it to get better because he's getting kind of tired of always having a bandage on it. I'm going to show you what his finger looks like right now. You see that there? See that giant bandage on his pinky finger? And it hurts? Yeah. It's kind of sad, isn't it? And so I thought it would be nice if we could just write him a little note to try to make him feel better about his pinky. What do you think about that idea? And then I'll give him the note. Does that sound okay? Okay, so...
Okay, so I think she does a good job of trying to create that shared experience, even though she doesn't have the background with these students. But they all now understand a real purpose and the real reason for writing, even if they don't know Dave. Okay, so that's the first element. The next element in the lesson is compose and rehearse the message. So compose and rehearse. This is all done orally. None of this is in writing. Don't put the pen down, everyone. It is just the discussion here. So here, it's really important for the students to understand and be clear on these things. What will we be writing? So we're going to write a letter, we're going to write a summary. Why are we even writing it? And who's going to read it? The reason that it's important for our students to know these things is because, again, we're setting them up for independence. When they go back to do writing now and in every piece in the future, we want them to have an acute awareness of who is their audience, what is their purpose for writing, and then usually the genre or text type will come after that. So, you know, I am sick of the dog park not having a fence. Well, I'm going to write to the council, I want a fence, and well, it seems logical that it'd be a persuasive piece. So these are the things that we need to get clear with our writers when we're talking about this and composing our message. Now, in composing, remember this is all oral, this is where we get to focus on the craft of writing. So if you're familiar with the 6 traits of writing, I love to use this as a framework for thinking about the qualities of all good writing. This is where we get to talk about ideas. You know, where can we get our ideas? How can we organize them? It's where we get to talk about structuring the piece. So would we start talking about our sore fingers first? Would we introduce ourselves? You know, what are we going to say in what order? What would make sense? It's where we get to talk to the students about word choice and thinking about the words that they're going to use in their writing, and even try to bump them up a little bit and really push them to stretch for new or interesting vocabulary, obviously dependent on where they're at and, you know, what their needs are and what your focus is. It's where we get to talk to them about voice and how they can bring their own unique voice to a piece of writing. And it's where we get to teach them and to focus on creating interesting sentences. So in the composing part that's all oral, this is where we get to focus on the writer's craft. And when we go back to write, that's when we can start focusing on the conventions. But those two things are different. And often we focus highly on the conventions, the actual handwriting, the spelling, the syntax, and we haven't had an opportunity to focus on the craft, the qualities within the writing. So in here, this is where it's important that we have that opportunity, or we use this as an opportunity to focus on the craft. Now, I want to go back to the key messages that I highlighted at the start, and just in particular, the first three, that we're supporting our students towards independence, that interactive writing is a process, and that the process is more important than the product. The reason that I'm highlighting these three key messages is because in interactive writing, I don't want you to be tempted to walk in and say, guys, this is what we're going to write today. I've come up with the message, and now it's just a matter of you and I sharing the pen. Let's get to the end of this thing. Part of interactive writing is that composing part. That's one of the parts that, if you think about it, especially in the older years, our kids sit there, reluctant writers, and say, oh, I can't think of anything to write about. Well, this is our opportunity to teach them how to think of things to write about, how to construct and wrestle with that idea to form a sentence in the first place. So composing, we could absolutely short circuit it and just go, look here, I've come up with the idea, right, this is what we're doing. And if we want to work just on conventions, then yes, you could probably do that. If you want to strengthen all of their writing and build their success towards independence, which includes coming up with an idea, placing those words in a sensible order, then we need to, do that composing work together. So just something to think about. When we're doing the compose and rehearse part of the composing part of our message that we're writing, these are some of the guiding questions that you can use as a teacher. How could we start our message? Does someone have another idea? So not just always accepting the first idea, and you saw Nell Duke do that in the video. Can someone add on to this person's ideas? Oh, how can we put all of those ideas into a sentence? Because when we go back to write independently, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a whole bunch of ideas, and then we've got to sort of put them through a pipeline so that it just comes out in one sentence. So let's practice that in this heavily guided, scaffolded environment. Listen as I say that's our sentence out loud. What do you think? Did that say what we wanted it to say? Because we can still change our sentence here, right? It's very flexible. We're still fiddling around with it. Will our reader be able to understand it if we say it that way? And this is right down in foundation where we can start directing our writers to the fact that they have a reader, and good writers care about their reader. They're always thinking about their reader because they want their reader to understand their message. So this is where we can start using that language. What would your reader think about that? Is that going to make it easy for your reader to understand? Is there another word we could use to make our sentence a bit clearer? Which sentence sounds better to you? So we've had a couple of options. Which one do you think we should go with? This isn't easy, is it? Because there's no script for this. This is the stuff that we have to do on the fly. But I think it's also the exciting part because you just never know what's going to come out of their mouths sometimes. Now, where interactive writing differs from language experience is that we need this sentence to be syntactically correct, and sometimes we need to correct some of the grammar that the students produce in their sentence. So this is where we can use, I hear what you're saying. When we write it, we say it like this. Because we want our students to know that what they say they can write, what they write they can read, but we also want them to know that when we write things down, it's slightly different to how we speak it. And that's what separates high quality writing from less effective writing. So let's have a look at what Nell Duke does to get this sentence happening.
AJ, can you tell me, do you have any ideas about what we could say to try to make Dave feel better about his cut pinky finger? What do you think we could say to make him feel better?
We hope you feel better. It's okay.
It's okay? It's going to be okay? And we hope you feel better? Those are good ideas. Brianna, do you have some ideas about what we could say to make Dave feel better?
Yes.
What do you think you might say?
He likes say, what?
Well, AJ had a couple different ideas. Let me share a couple of his ideas and see what you think might work well. He said maybe we could say we hope you feel better, or maybe we could say it's going to be okay. What do you think?
It might be okay.
That might be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think, Leah? What would you like to say to Dave about his hurt finger?
It's probably gonna get better. I've had I read everyone writing this note has had cuts, and it hurts a lot.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, you've all had cuts or owies on your fingers that have gotten better. And so I think that it's a great idea for us to tell Dave that.
Firstly, what I love about that is that girl's put on her thinking glasses. Doesn't every kid just need some thinking glasses? You got your Dame Edna glasses on there to come up with good ideas. The other thing I like is that Nell Duke provides some good wait time, which I've always got to remind everyone. We all need a reminder of how effective wait time is for the students to come up with that sentence. And I also love that she doesn't just grab the first idea and run with that, because real writing is so complex. We have so many ideas, and we have to learn to synthesize those down into just one message. So I can see that she's setting them up for success with real writing here. So once they've composed their message, they know what they're going to say, then it's important to rehearse it so that they know what it is that they're about to write. And the reason is because it's sort of like compartmental. We want to close that off. We don't want to have to start be thinking about ideas when we're trying to focus on actually scribing. We want that part done. So we're no longer trying to construct an idea and, hold all of that. We've got that and we've memorized it. So here in the rehearsing part, we can ask our students to repeat the sentence several times until it's been put to memory. We can count the number of words in the sentence. We can clap each of the words in the sentence. We can turn and talk to someone to tell them the sentence that we're about to write. We can tap the words, all different types of things. The purpose is we want this committed to memory so that we can now turn our attention to actually scribing the thing that we've just committed to memory.
Dave. So now we've written Dear Dave, and you said you were going to say, it will be okay. That was something that each of you said something about his finger will be okay, right? So
I said that.
You said that. You sure did, Brianna. You said it would be okay, just like your cut was okay. And Leah thought that it would probably be okay or might be okay. And AJ thought it might, just like his finger was okay. So we're going to say the sentence, it will be okay. Can you all say that with me? Ready? It will be okay. Let's say it again. It will be okay. All right, now we're going to count how many words are in that sentence. Are you ready? Ready? It will be okay. Now, okay is just one word. So let's do it again. Ready? It will be okay. So how many words did you count there? Can you hold up your fingers for how many words you think you have? Brianna's holding up 4 fingers. That's what I think too. And AJ's holding up.
So here, one of the purposes of getting them to count is simply to get them to keep repeating the sentence so they know what it is. The other thing is that you'll notice they're not composing the whole entire letter here. They're just composing one sentence at a time. So we're trying to reduce the cognitive load for students. So let's just compose one sentence at a time, because later, if we really wanted to, then we can come back and reread it and start to shift things if it's not in the right position. So just be conscious of that. We're not trying to memorize the whole entire letter in that. We're just thinking a little bit ahead. Put that script to memory, and then we can focus on the actual scribing of it, which is sharing the pen. In sharing the pen, this is when we can change from thinking about the craft to thinking about conventions of writing, okay? So who shares the pen? Who comes up to take the pen? This is decided on the needs of your students. This isn't okay, well, you write first, then you write the next word. Then it's not a round robin of everyone gets a go. It's a, we're not at the fun fair. We are thinking, okay, what are the needs of the students in front of me? This one needs to work on this. This one needs to work on this. So that's when I'm going to call on them to contribute to the writing. When something is present in the writing that is at their point of need. So that's the tricky part about teaching, isn't it? It's so we can't get this from a script. We have to use our professional knowledge for this. So this is where we individualize the instruction. We align it to what the students sitting in front of us need. Important point here, the teacher records what the students already know. So that if our students have already well and truly got the word that happening in there, there's little point in getting someone to come up and write that, because it's something that we've all worked on. Everyone already knows how to do it. We want to focus on the nudging forward. What are the next steps? Unless, of course, there's a student in your class and you're trying to build their confidence with the few words that they know, yes, then we'll get them to come up and write that. But we're trying to think about pushing them forward into that next, nudging them into that next bit of learning. We want to use this as an opportunity to teach students how to strategize, how to, that word's a bit tricky. How could I work it out? Because we're sitting with them. This is high support here. So before we're going to send them off to do it independently. So may as well give them that opportunity while we're here. So when we go back to our key messages, number one is that we're always thinking, are we helping these students move towards independence? And the fourth one, are we being responsive to the needs of the students in this session, in this group that I've got here? So I just want to show you an example. Thank you so much to Katrina Golan from Melrose Primary School up north, out on, in the region. Just an example of the difference between what this could look like. On the left-hand side, you can see Matt is a dinosaur who is a bully. He does not want the toys to leave because he's been at the bottom forever. I think they've been watching Toy Story. You can see the teacher has written some of the words and done a line to help the students to write the other words. You can see the ones that the students have written because they're not in red for starters. And I'm sure Katrina has worked out which way to put her S's, but on the right-hand side, this text, the entire text was written by one student. And then the group worked to make sure that each of the words was spelled correctly in that piece. So there's no one set amount of words or letters that students should contribute. It's completely reliant on you knowing the needs of your students. Are they ready to contribute one word? Are they ready to contribute many words? Maybe they're only ready to contribute a single letter. That's totally fine. That's what interactive writing is all about. So in sharing the pen, you can write in different ways. One, particularly if you're way down in foundation and you're still trying to cement that concept of a word, you could write each word on one card of paper, and then so students can see, oh yes, there's a definite gap between those cards. This isn't recommended. It's not recommended to stick with cards because it's too cumbersome. Who has time to cut the cards and all of that? Obviously in remote learning, that's not even working. You can move to strips of paper. So you saw that with the Symmetry example earlier. You could use lined paper. You could use a visual diary, particularly if you're going to use it with a small group. Using a visual diary means that is kept. We can pull that out again and say, okay, let's look at the writing that we're working on last time. You can do it on a whiteboard, although obviously the downside of this is that you don't get to keep the writing. So it is one thought. Another use of a whiteboard is if you are doing it in a larger setting, rather than having everyone watch one student come to the board, you can have everyone has their own whiteboard and everyone have a quick write that on your whiteboard so that you have more interaction. But I think probably the best example is to use butcher's paper so you can pull it out again, because we want this to be a source of constant reading in the classroom, for a long time. Now, when it comes to the focus and the thing that you're going to turn the dial up on in the lesson, there are many things. So let's have a look at a couple of them. So one is convention. When we're talking about conventions, one is spelling. Obviously, this is prime teaching practice for helping your students to learn how do I go about spelling words when I'm sitting back at my table independently writing? What are my options? What are some strategies that I could use? So here, when we talked about phonological awareness, phonemic awareness in the last webinar, this is where we're going to show them, where we're going to start to connect phonics to the writing, and we're going to demonstrate to them, we're going to let them have a little practice with us. So another example of this, again from Caitlin, you can see over here in this lesson, they were learning how to use a have a go sheet over on the side. So they had their text here. We loved the dolphins and the seals because they are friendly. We want to hug them and live with them. I see some issues with living under the sea, but anyway, over on the right hand side, they've had an opportunity with a teacher sitting there scaffolding. Let's work out how this have a go sheet works. And you can see the types of words where students have contributed: love and we too. So you think about, okay, what were the needs of this group? The other thing I want to draw your attention to in this example is down the right hand side, underneath the word hug on the have a go sheet, you can see that Caitlin has very cleverly given each of these students their own color texter and written their initials here. So this then becomes your assessment. And it's on Butcher's paper, so we can start to see the progress over time of each of the students and the contribution that they made to this interactive writing piece. I think that is so clever. Such a great piece of formative assessment on the fly as well. All right, so one focus could be spelling. We could look at grammar. So how, this obviously when we're moving up 1 and 2, how to write a complete sentence, how to choose the right tense, especially if we're working with EAL students. When and where do we use a capital letter? These punctuation. So especially, I've put the first one there, how punctuation helps the reader to understand the text. Don't forget, punctuation is all about the reader, and we need our students to understand that. It's always giving the reader a signal of how we want them to read this. Handwriting, of course, we could use it as an opportunity to help our students to learn the nuances of handwriting. And then as we're moving through the years, we can start to talk to them about text layout and genre features and all of those types of things. All right, I'm just going to skip over when they shared the pen in there because I think, it was remote learning. Move on to 4 is to reread the message and review the learning. Reviewing the learning is, this is sort of the debrief, before we want our students to walk away from this interactive writing session going, oh yes, that's what we learnt and that's what I can apply in my own writing now. Thank you for that. So we don't want to leave it up to chance that our students learned in that lesson, oh yes, we were focusing on capital letters and don't forget you can do that in your own writing. We've got to make it explicit at the end of the session to say, wow, today this is what we learned about. So always connecting the learning to their independent writing, revisiting the points, and we want to do lots and lots of rereading of what we've just written. Why? Because that's what real writers do. That's what we want our kids to do when they go back to their independent writing. We want them to remember to go back up to the start, reread, go back up the start again, reread again. We want them to know that rereading is what good writers do. So let's do it in here. All right, so for the review part, this is where we say, can you find a place where we used an interesting word or where we thought really hard about choosing the best word? Can you find a word that begins like the? Can you count the number of words we wrote? Can you find a place where we used a capital letter? Whatever your focus was, at the end of this session, we want to just make sure that they don't leave the session without knowing that was the focus, and that's what they need to keep in their mind. And the final part is sharing the audience, sharing with our intended audience. Why? Because then the students can see the full loop. We've basically taken a piece of writing through to publication. So this was Dave's message back to the students after he received their message. And sorry that it's blurry, but it was blurry on the video. It says, Dear AJ, Brianna and Leah, thank you for writing that my finger will be okay. I'm happy to say that it doesn't hurt anymore. Tomorrow I can take the bandage off. Sincerely, Dave. So the students can see we wrote a message on paper, we delivered that message, and we got a reply they've seen that full cycle of writing, and then they can start to build that knowledge that writing is powerful, and maybe they could do this in their own lives. We're not just talking about writing in captivity here. All right, I am going to give you a 2-minute reflection time before I finish up by telling you very quickly what the research is on interactive writing. I'll see you in 2 minutes. Put your thoughts in the chat too. I'd love to see you thinking. Okay, everyone, we are in the home straight. I'll to the why now. We've defined it. We've talked about the different teaching practices, what the lesson elements are, and now we can talk about the why. Why? Well, I'm hoping that you can already see the why for interactive writing. It's because it enables scaffolded application of so many elements of writing. And it's completely reliant on the skills that your students have and that they need. So whether they need you to focus on concepts of print and talking about the differences between words and sentences and letters, whether it's phonemic awareness, and you saw that in the video with Nell Duke talking to the students about sounding out the word dear, phonics, all of that knowledge that we've been learning over in that lesson in reading, actually we can pull that over into our writing, and we can use that to help us in our writing as well. So the kids can start to see those connections, letter formation, all of these different types of things. Okay, so a couple of the bits of research that I wanted to draw your attention to, and you can get a copy of the slides after this anyway if you don't get to read these. This one, exploring interactive writing as an effective practice for increasing alphabet knowledge skills. This is for students aged between 3 and 5 years old, so definitely down in the juniors. This is actually early childhood. The results of the study showed that children receiving interactive writing identified more lowercase and uppercase letters at the end of the study compared to the students who were in the control group. Then another one, 10 minutes a day. This was a study, as the name suggests, where the classes spent 10 minutes a day on interactive writing process. They did it as a whole class. And the results showed that those who participated in interactive writing, this is year 1 class, not only improved in their overall independent writing, but also made greater gains in 9 out of 10 of the individual subcomponents of writing. So again, we're thinking about writer's craft, ideas, organization, word choice, sentence fluency, and the rest of it. So definitely has the research to say that interactive writing is an especially effective practice in the junior classrooms, and that's why I wanted to bring it to you tonight. And yet another example, the effects of an adapted interactive writing intervention on kindergarten, which is equivalent of our foundation, on children's phonological awareness, spelling, and early reading development. And it showed to improve all of those things. In the slides, I have included, obviously this has got way too much text on it. It's because I want you to read it when you get a copy of the slides. Some suggestions from the DET team on using interactive writing to support particularly EAL learners. So, and as we always say, practices, effective teaching practices for those students are effective for all students. So definitely worth having a look at. And I want to finish off by pointing you to some resources. One is the Fuse website, where you can go to get access to all of the past webinars, including the slides and the resources, the resource packs. So you can go on there. Two, if you want to further your learning about interactive writing, just a couple of books that might be of interest to you. On the left is one called Interactive Writing by Macaria, Fountas and Pennell. And on the right, Interactive Writing Across the Grades. I would lean towards the one on the right. If you think, wow, I want to absolutely learn everything there is to know about interactive writing, I'd probably choose the one on the right. I found it to be more useful. And that is it. I'm hoping that you will feel empowered to have a go at interactive writing, even in the remote teaching environment. You get better at this practice by doing it. So if it doesn't go right the first time, that's okay. Reflect, think about what you can tweak and change, and have another go. So I wish you all of the best with your interactive writing practices. Teaching writing is so exciting, and I'm so glad that in the next webinar, we get to talk about teaching writing even more. So I will see you then in October. Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. I better finish off with the success criteria, and hopefully we'll all be face-to-face in October. Goodbye.